I joined the society in 1968.
And when you joined, who were the movers and shakers in the field and the most prominent people at the time?
The year I joined was the year that I decided to stop doing general surgery at Leahy and joined Neil Swinton, who was running a program of training for colorectal surgeons. And he invited me to come to the annual meeting. And that year, Ray Jackman was the president, Ray Jackman from the Mayo Clinic, and unbeknownst to me, Neil Swinton, who had invited me to come to the meeting, which was in Denver, was the incoming president. And that year, he spent most of the time taking me around meeting people who he liked. The movers and the shakers at that time were people who I knew very little about, but Ray Jackman, being head of the department at Mayo, was an important person. And then in the years that followed that, there were people like Don Gallagher, Alex Castro, John Remington, Moss Stearns. These were the people who were, and a fellow named Jack McAdams from Pittsburgh. They were the people who were doing the real thinking behind the activities of this society.
Do you have any particular individual or a couple of individuals that you would consider your mentors in this field?
Well, you know, in this field, perhaps unfairly outside the field, the time I spent as working with Dr. Cattell, who did abdominal perineal resection by opening the abdomen, doing the work in the abdomen, closing the abdomen after making the colostomy, turn the patient on the side, and remove the rectum from below. And this was dubbed by the residents as the hour of charm. And he was really, as Alton Oxner said one time when he was there as a visiting Leahy professor, I hope you young men know, as Dr. Cattell left the room and we were behind to close the patient, I hope you young men know that you're working with the world's greatest living surgeon. And we did know that. He was marvelous. And so that he was very important in my development. But in terms of our field, Alan Parks played a big part in my thinking. He was an expert in anal physiology and anatomy and did innovative things in that part of the body. And I just, with him, it was, he was the one who led all of us across the world into the ilioanal operation. And then Roop Turnbull was a charismatic person, and he was one who was a keen representative of our specialty. He was about the leading light in the eyes of general surgeons at that time because of his no-touch technique, giving lectures at the Royal College of Surgeons in London and such. And he caught the fancy of the general surgeons and raised a lot of noise amongst us that we needed to get recognition by the general surgeons as a specialty. So he was an important person. And then Don Gallagher, who was chairman of the board of governors of the College of Surgeons, was pushing me to move ahead in our field and arrange somehow that I be nominated to the board of governors of the College of Surgeons and let me get to be known by these people. And I think between him, mainly him, and a little bit from me, we got some recognition in the eyes of the general surgical body.
When you first started participating with the society, what kinds of committee appointments did you have, and how did your society career develop?
You know, I can't honestly remember that I ever was on a committee. I know that Neil Swinton somehow engineered that I might be considered as a vice president the year he was president, and then it was pointed out that I wasn't a member of the society yet. But the thing was that somehow or other I got onto the council. I don't think I was ever on a committee. And so there was a long period of time when I was on the council, and then secretary for several years, and then you're president-elect and past president. And so there was a long period of time that I was involved in thinking and decision-making that the society was doing. And it was a rare privilege. The society was small when I went. And certainly as secretary, I honestly believe I knew everybody who was a member of the society. And it's tough for anybody to know everybody who's a member of the society at this time.
What other observations do you have about how the society's evolved?
Well, a big step occurred when Stanley Goldberg engineered that a lot of general surgeons be invited to come to our national meeting. And that produced a groundswell of increased membership in the society. It changed the style of the society somewhat, because the sort of tight little group of colon and rectal surgeons, which was the nucleus of the place, was somewhat swamped by people who were not necessarily true blue colorectal surgeons, but they added a great deal to the style of the society. I think the things that have really moved the society forward was the resurrection of the foundation. Due to Pat Mazier and Jim Guthrie's efforts, this somewhat dormant opportunity for funding research took on a new life, and that was a big step forward that made things different for the society. And as a result, maybe of that and of other factors that had influence on our society, I think research papers took on a bigger role in the programming of our society, and that couldn't help but enhance our reputation.
You mentioned earlier about enhancing our relationship with the general surgeons. You're one of the few people who's been president of the Board of Colon and Rectal Surgeons twice, and a very valued early representative to the Board of Surgery. Could you tell us about how you developed that relationship with the Board of Surgery?
Well, I think that a lot of that is because of Roop Turnbull and his reputation amongst general surgeons. And he belonged to the American Surgical Association, and he felt that it was unlikely that others would follow in his footsteps because of the sort of landmark materials that he'd presented to the surgical world of not touching the tumor until the last vessel had been ligated and so on. And he pushed me into this direction. And Don Gallagher, who had influence with the college and had been a big help. And then as I was a guest examiner at a board exam here in Boston, the board examiners kept wondering why I wasn't asking colorectal questions of the candidates. And I said because I thought that it was unfair that the people that we trained knew more about colorectal surgery than the general surgical trainee, and that if they wanted to ask questions about colorectal surgery of the candidates, they should do that. But I felt that we shouldn't be judging them by our standards of training, and I think that must have influenced them somehow or other. They decided that I should be nominated to be a member of the American Board of Surgery, and I was a director till I turned 65.
There's been a lot of interest in the change in the name of the society from the American Proctologic Association and the board from the American Board of Proctology. Do you have any recollections about that change?
Yes, all that seemed to occur around the late 60s and early 70s. And part of it was because of Roop feeling we needed to point out that we did more than anal surgery, that we should be known as colon surgeons as well. And he was pushing for this. And the leadership of the society was accepting of this. There was one interesting doctor from Richmond, Virginia, named Robert V. Terrell, who was opposed to the change because he was a proctologist, and he pointed out that many people who had been the forebears of this group were proctologists. And he was denied his, he felt it was, firstly he thought it was strange to change the name of the society that said American Board of Colon and Rectal Surgery, using a noun for one part of the body and an adjective for another part. I remember him standing up on the stage saying that. And then the other thing was that when we did this change sort of gradually, I think my memory is that we had a two-tiered exam where people could be credentialed as a proctologist, but most people who had trained in general surgery and then been trained in colon and rectal surgery wanted to be known as a colon and rectal surgeon. And those changes took place, and I think it was somewhere around 1972 when the society finally changed its name.
As you've thought back on your career, is there any individual or a couple of individuals that you wish you could have spent more time with? Well,
I think Alan Parks was someone that he and I had a good relationship, and I thought he was someone who knew a lot about colon and rectal surgery, and some of the techniques that I used in dealing with large villous tumors of the rectum and so on were things that Alan had showed me how to do, and it led to the pull-through operations for the ilioanal operations and such that Alan and his colleagues at St. Mark's had been the forebears of. Roop Turnbull was an interesting fellow. He did have a charisma, and he was very formative in the background to changing the society's name. I wished I'd had more time with Norman Nigro, who was a delightful man, and who gave so much of his self to the society and to our board. And I hate to say something about somebody who's still very active, but I wish I had more time with Haran Abkarian, because he is a stimulating person. Lots of fun, but lots of brains.
Finally, you have any predictions for the future of the specialty?
Well, you know, next year I will have finished 20 years of retirement. When I started 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was said that the knowledge in medicine doubled every 10 years. Well, I'm sure it's doubling more quickly than that now. And it is wonderful that our society has had such an important role in training people, in self-assessment examinations, in the Research Foundation's activities. I think I hope that we will continue to have a bent for things that are scientific as well as physiological and surgical in our career, and I see the society moving in that direction. When I have occasion to go to a scientific meeting of our society, I find that the things that got me a reputation, allowed me to travel around the world speaking and this and that, have all died. Nobody would do those things that I did, because they do better things, and that's the way life is. And the society is moving forward in the right direction, and it's wonderful to see. But I can't help but think back when I did the presidential address in 1980, and I titled it Who Dug Your Well? And that's because the Chinese leader Chu Enlai had a statement that he made that when you drink the water, remember who dug the well. And that's the way our society is. It's built on years of people working hard to get us where we're at.